Welcome to Talk of the Bay. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman, and I'm speaking with someone who's very intimately connected to the insurance world. Kirk Wilson Clifton is an insurance advisor. He is, I guess you would call him an insurance broker. And Kirk, how long have you been working in the business?
20 years?
Has all of that been in California?
Yes.
So we've been doing a series on the California insurance crisis here at Case Grid, and we interviewed the deputy director of the insurance commission for Laura. And I understand they're trying to make a fix to both make insurance accessible and affordable for people in so-called high-risk areas. And to paint a broader picture, many people have been canceled by State Farm, and insurers have been saying they will not write policies at all in California for homeowners. So that's the backdrop of this. I guess I want to start by asking you, how would you characterize what's going on now?
It's many years in the making. And it's not necessarily just Ricardo Lara's fault, but maybe previous insurance commissioners. The forecast from the carriers, they've been asking for max rate increases for like up to 18 years now. They would ask for 20% and then they would get 3, or they wouldn't get as much, rate increase as they wanted. And with several other factors, this is the reason why that's the start of the reason why we're in this position, because as most of you know, and with inflation and the cost of everything rapidly increasing, the cost to rebuild your home also rapidly increases. And with the amount of losses we've had in California in the last, 6 or 8 years, it's pretty astronomical. And they're just not willing to insure it. It's not profitable for them anymore.
So would you say, though, that the rate increases they were requesting, you said 20%, are reasonable, or where do you find out what the line is between reasonable and greedy for the shareholders?
I don't. If you operate on 2.5%, you're on the borderline. You're on the brink of distinction, and that's what the insurance carriers are now running on because of the cost of everything and the amount of their losses. So, I mean, it's a catch-22. What is affordable? I mean, your home is your most valuable asset you'll have in your adult life, and to be able to insure your home for $800 a year for it's $1 million reconstruction costs. Yeah, that's affordable for the consumer, but it's not affordable for the insurance companies. Nor
So
should it be.
yeah, you're the middleman, right? You're trying to please the person trying to buy insurance, and
Yep.
yet you have limited options you can offer them. Tell me a little bit about the California Fair Plan, which seems like where all these homeowners are being forced to go. And full disclosure, I am one of them. And full disclosure, you are helping us try to get the best deal possible, which we appreciate. But in the bigger picture, how do you walk this line in the middle where you're trying to make things possible for people, but there's this fair plan, which if everyone goes on it, that's in a fire danger area and there is a big wildfire, it could sink the program, right? So it's not really sustainable in the long run.
Honestly, I don't think it's sustainable right now. If there was a major loss, then they would have to be backed up, obviously by the state or the feds. If there was another catastrophe, like say, up in Santa Rosa or Paradise or, down south, they've had some, massive fires. And so it's not that I don't think they would go away. It's just that, and I don't think anybody wants the government involved in insurance anymore, to be honest with you. And I think, I mean, you go back to Obamacare and everything's affordable and everybody's going to have insurance. Well, it is not affordable anymore. It is astronomical. And so, it's a catch-22. And it's not just California, it's a nationwide problem.
Well, it's
Even
climate change, right? I mean, there's worsening wildfires, and it's partly due to the drought climate, that we're in here in California, but it's gotten far worse due to a number of factors. So, what you're saying, it sounds like, is that California homeowners who are in high risk areas should just bite the bullet and hope they can afford.
I do think that there's supposedly, we got an email yesterday from Ricardo Lara that they're working on something that's supposed to be in place by December. And like they're mandating carriers in high fire areas to write 85% of that area. Does that mean rates are going to go down? Absolutely, they're not going to go down. You might have one carrier instead of two. They're not going to go down. And the biggest rating factors right now are you have to be within 1,000 feet of a publicly recognized fire hydrant and within 5 miles of a fire station. And if you are outside of that, then you get surcharged. And I do agree with you. I do think part of it is climate change. The other part is mismanagement of our forests that dates all the way back to 1991. And I was just in Santa Cruz in your area a couple weekends ago, driving over 17. It's absolutely breathtaking. However, it is also frightening. And there's just nothing. And the same area where I live in Sonora, it's just nothing but massive trees and under, brush and all that. And if we're not able to forest and thin out the forest, then we're going to have this issue for a very long time.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that the Lara plan will not lower prices. It'll simply spread out the risk to other companies. And will it allow small companies to enter the market? Because one of the complaints are these monopoly, like State Farm and Farmers, that don't leave any room for competition because they're predatory and monopolizing the.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's going to be affordable. Okay, it's supposed to open up to smaller markets. However, they answer to the reinsurers as well. So if you open up to a smaller market and they come in, like it was years ago, Merced Insurance, and they took a wash in total bat. They were super cheap. And when the Paradise Fire happened, they went bankrupt and got taken over by the state, like immediately, because they over insured. So if I'm insuring your home for say $1,000 and it's a $500,000 reconstruction cost, they're going to take part of that money. They have to pay all the taxes and fees and all that, and then they also fund the Cal Fair. Any admitted carrier in California that writes home, then they also, a little portion of that goes to the California Fair Plan as well to help fund that as well. Okay, but it's going to take a long time to invest $1,000 a year to equal a total loss of $500,000. It is not feasible. I was just in Texas at a wedding. Their insurance rates are astronomical, way higher than California. We are behind the curve. California is so far behind, and it's so expensive to live here. The insurance rates have to catch up. I'm not trying to defend any insurance company or anything like that, or whether you think it's a monopoly or whatever it is. They all have to make money, and they buy their reinsurance from, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, BlackRock or whoever. And as soon as they get to a certain point, the reinsurers are like, oh, pump the brakes. We can't do it anymore. Or we have to raise rates. And if you don't get the rates raised, then it's just not going to work.
Well, you just mentioned reinsurance. Not a lot of our listeners probably know that there's this secondary insurance business that insures the insurers.
Correct.
And that there's some bills in Congress that would shore that up, or at least change the relationship of these reinsurers to the insurance market. And I don't know what those would do exactly, but they're supposedly going to, stabilize the markets so so these companies don't just leave. I wanted to quote a couple of things from Consumer Watchdog, which they've been the most critical of Lara's plan. And we interviewed Carmen Balber, their executive director, not long ago. She said, Insurance Commissioner Lara's plan gives insurance companies 2 years to comply with the new regulations, but they can start to charge more immediately. After 2 years, if the companies can say they can't meet their goals, the commissioner can just move the goalposts. This was one consumer benefit in Lara's proposal, but the exceptions swallow the rule. So they don't think they think there's too many loopholes to protect consumers. What's your response to That's
Well, I
the
agree. So if it's a 2-year deal and knock on wood, but it can happen, another catastrophe. Well, I mean, you guys had it in Santa Cruz as well.
yes.
And if you are locked in at, say, let's just use your house, for example, I'm going to say $1,000. If your house goes down, there's no way they have the funds to back that up.
They
And
meaning
so
insurance companies, not the
the,
fair plan. We're talking about
the insurance, right. The insurance companies.
Mhm.
I mean, because it's a pool, I mean, they have all this money in there, and then when something bad happens, or there's 5 homes on the same block that go down, and the same insurance company insures all those, they have a lot of money to fork out. And as we all know, to rebuild in California right now is sky high, super sky high. And so it's a catch 22. I mean, when you go to the grocery store, you walk out with 2 grocery bags, that's $100. Okay. It's the same thing for your home, for your auto, and it doesn't change. So I believe the days of, $1,000 homeowners insurance policies are going to be fewer and farther between. I mean, they're starting to spread out, and the risk, somewhat in the valley area, somewhat in the big city areas, uh, and even throughout the other states, the losses that the carriers are not willing to absorb, they're spreading it out all over the place. And so we're seeing it all over because Florida's a disaster. Um, I mean, amongst other states, Texas always has a bunch of hail, and then there's tornadoes in Missouri and whatever. I mean, all the issues you have, that's different insurance, but it all goes into one kitty.
And it
And,
always seems to
and
come back to the consumer. I mean, like you said, they're spreading it around. Even auto insurance is going up because homeowners insurance is risky for them. Um, One of the things I think we haven't touched on in these conversations, except cursorily, is the impact on the housing market. California has always been seen as gold. If you get a house, it'll always go up in value. But there's also this law that says that if you want to get a mortgage, you have to have insurance. And so, which makes sense. They don't want to lose
totally
their
right.
investment either. However, if you can't get insurance or you can't afford it, it's going to either add to the cost of buying a home that's already sky high, or people just can't make the purchase happen. And do you think that it's starting to show? I mean, so many people have been canceled and they're scrambling. Do you think
Mhm.
that it will depress in these fire prone areas the housing market to the point where it's going to be very difficult to get a mortgage or insurance? And so people with cash will be the only ones shopping for these homes.
There are a lot of cash buyers now. I mean,
But
there are
there's a limited number of people who can do that. I mean, there's
totally
yeah.
100%. And there are new people buying homes, and they're biting the bullet, and we're finding ways to manipulate the coverage so they have enough to rebuild the house. They might have to self-insure a little portion of it, or, there's different ways that you could manipulate it for them. But yes, it is becoming an issue. And then you have the income to debt loss rate or ratio that you have to qualify for. So if you're buying a new home, first time home buyers, and it's $4,000 and they don't qualify, then you have to go a different route and try and, manipulate it so it works for them to get in their house.
I would imagine there's people looking at this whole situation who were thinking about moving who will just stay put. They'll just maybe even go underinsured
Mhm.
because, maybe they'll get on the fair plan for what's left of their mortgage, but they might not get the other plan, which is not, it's not as expensive, but people have to have just like Social Security, you have to have a supplement in
Right.
homeowners insurance. The
Mhm.
fair plan only covers fire, but not, tree falling on your home or
No, the fair
someone
plan
suing
covers,
you or other things that happen.
right. The fair plan covers fire, smoke, wind, hail, vandalism, and malicious mischief. And if
And
that's the only thing you have, then you have no liability. You don't have any medical pay to others, somebody coming on your property and tripping and falling, or there's no leaky pipe damage. If you have a pipe burst and you're gone on vacation or anything like that, then you have no coverage. So they work in together. They work, in cahoots, for lack of a better term. But some people just don't if they own it and they don't have a mortgage, then other people, sometimes they just say, I'm not going to do it.
Is that
And
what's
they
meant
just,
by self-insured? Which
yeah.
means
So they'll just self-insure it and they'll just be like, hey, I'm not going to have the coverage, is too expensive. And so I'm not going to buy it. So that's a risk they're willing to take. I don't, I don't advise that, but I mean, that's up to them.
right, if they don't have a mortgage. But if you do have one, will they let you just do the fair plan and not the supplement?
Yes, you can just do the fair plan. Mhm.
If you just join me, I'm speaking with Kurt Clifton. Excuse me. He's an insurance advisor, insurance agent who works in the state of California. We're talking about the ongoing insurance crisis in California and in other parts of the country in reliance on these fair or plans of last resort and the Lara plan, which is supposed to fix some problems in the market. Going back to that plan, Kurt, what do you see as the upsides and downsides of what is being proposed, and how quickly do you think it will come into effect if there are indeed changes that are positive?
I, how quickly? I don't have faith in how quickly it's going to happen. Um, just I believe that they kind of just implement things sometimes, and they don't necessarily have a plan. I don't know what that plan is. I don't like, if you're going to force all these people to write in certain areas, I don't think the rates are going to go down for people. I think the rates are going to stay high. They're just going to have one carrier instead of two. I honestly believe that. I mean, there's certain things I think they could, they could do, have a wildfire deductible on top of just a house fire deductible. You could have a house fire deductible of say $1,000, and you could do a wildfire deductible of 25,000. So if there is a wildfire that breaks out and your home burns down, you'll have a $25,000 deductible instead of, to try and help keep rates down. It's kind of like earthquake insurance. If you want earthquake insurance in California, you buy it separately. If you want flood insurance in California, you buy it separately. It's not all inclusive. It's not just in a home. Um, and I if I could forecast exactly what they would be, I would probably not be selling insurance right now.
And I imagine that's one of the criticisms is these the algorithms or the computer modeling that they do. It's supposed to be highly accurate. Of course, they want it to be because they want to minimize
Right.
their risks. They're betting that your house won't burn down, and you're betting it will in some weird way when you
Right.
take out insurance. Um, but this idea that no one is allowed to see how these computer models are made or operating means they could be
Mhm.
tweaking them in any old way and we'd never know it. Don't you think we have the right to know as consumers how they're coming up with these probabilities and whether they're looking at what you're actually doing to make your home safer versus a whole zip code that's supposedly risky? Which is
Right.
kind of a broad brushstroke when some neighbors are doing lots and others aren't doing anything.
Yeah, I think it should be made available to the consumer, but that's not my decision.
Of
And
course
if it
not.
was, then I would say, they should probably open it up, but who knows? I mean, I know, and I think I told you this when we were on the phone a couple weeks ago. My father-in-law since retired, but he was a CPA in Paradise for 33 years during the fire, and he was there during the fire. His office building actually made it. It did not burn down, but it was completely and totally damaged because of all the smoke. So it was a total rebuild. And he had a friend who had this really nice house. I mean, he had sprinklers on the roof, he had sprinklers inside, he had cement siding. His place was clean. He always raked it. He had a big pool. He had sprinklers everywhere. And his house did not burn in the fire, but it burned around him, and it burnt so hot it completely and totally shrunk, sucked all the oxygen out of the inside of his house, and it just shriveled everything. Like his refrigerator was like a soda can that you step on and crush.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
it was really, really wild, and it was a total loss. So it doesn't necessarily always just because your property is really nice and you clean it. It's, you got to look at the broad picture. If you just do a Google Earth shot, use your address, and you look at everything around it, and that will give you the answer of why the insurance rates are so high and why we're in that predicament.
And yet homeowners like me and like my neighbors have done a lot, but there's only so much. If you own 5 acres and half of it is in thick forest, the
Right.
amount of cost it would be to undercut all of the brush and limb up every single tree, on a 5 acre property.
Hmm.
You could say, well, tough, you move there, you should be managing it. But most people didn't think that they would be creating a parkland out of their wild
Disposition.
forest, nor could
Right.
they afford it. Would be hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that, uh,
Hmm.
given even the cheapest of labor and simple tools. So um,
Right.
this is the problem, I think, that there isn't enough support for homeowners to do the right thing. And so these companies are just looking at whole neighborhoods and saying, even towns that are not in the wildfire area, they're using, well, you're near it. So, um,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's no real answer for it. And what do you mean by there's no support?
Well, there's no grants you can apply for that would offset the level that would be required to really do what you're talking about, which is private forest management, right?
Hmm.
People with large acreages, I don't think we're prepared financially to do that. They might be able to clear around their home like your friend did. Um,
Hmm.
but there's whole wild lands that, you know, are large and most people couldn't afford to do the level of clearing that would be required to prevent a major firestorm in a hot, drought prone area. So, you
Well,
know,
and I think I don't know. Maybe you should write a grant, Rachel. It sounds like you should do that or apply for one somehow.
maybe
I think
so.
it's a
Yeah, I'll
great
get out
idea.
there
I think
with
it's a
my
great idea.
moppers.
I mean, I know that like in Tuolumne County up here in Sonora, we're kind of by Yosemite. And there has been tons of grants and people have, cleaned up as best they can. And it's like in the hundreds of millions of dollars that they've spent. And it is like 1/32 of the property in our county.
Yeah.
And and again, it dates back to not being or mismanagement of the forest. Let's call it what it is. It's not the spotted owl or anything like that. It's complete and total mismanagement of the forest. And this is what we get for 40 years of neglecting it. And I might not be popular by saying that, but that is the truth. And so now to find grants and money and to get it all done is nearly impossible.
There was a recent interview on our airwaves with someone who's part of the Prescribed Burn Association, and Newsom is saying that he wants to do 25%, of the lands that need it in a prescribed burn area. And
Mhm.
that seems very ambitious because I think they said right now 6% of the lands that need it are getting that treatment. So there's a lot to be done. And again, it's a backlog of doing like management, prescribed burns, and other safe things, we hope.
Mhm.
But that's not going to immediately solve,
No, it's not.
homeowners insurance crisis, which is upon us already.
Yeah, and
So
it's not just in the homeowner side, it's on the commercial side as well. The commercial side of and as we all know that those insurance costs trickle down to the consumer as well. So when you go and you buy something and the rates or the prices have gone up, well, part of it's probably because their insurance has gone up as well. So, it's I don't know what you want to call it, it's trickle down or whatever you want to call it. To be honest, everybody's going to pass the buck along to the consumer, and that's where we are. We're consumers.
we
And I mean,
are,
I'm a
yeah.
consumer and I'm on the fair plan in a DIC as well right now. And I'm not very excited about it, but it is what it is. And I'm not going to not insure my house.
Yeah, well, I feel like this conversation has been, kind of leading us around in circles in terms of what the consumer is going to be looking at. And it sounds like, from what you're saying anyway, that we're pretty much stuck with high rates, but maybe we'll have more choices and more stability in the market as far as being able to insure our homes at all, which is pretty low bar to be looking at, but maybe
I
that's
would agree with you 100%. I do. I think rates are going to be high. Um, that's just my prediction. Like I said, I don't know, but I think they're going to stay high. Whether they're going to be as high as like what we talked about with you, I hope not. But I think it's just it's kind of a crapshoot. We don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. Maybe the head honchos know, and they've been working on it supposedly. Um, we just got that I'll email you that announcement that came yesterday.
Sure, I could post it with this interview along with the Consumer Watchdog statement on the Lara plan. So yes, if you could pass it on, that would be great to share with our listeners.
Yeah, I'm gonna send it to you right now.
Thank you.
So yeah, I don't know what the 100% what the answer is, but I don't see rates going down very much.
Well, and we're going to probably have more wildfires because we are going for hotter and hotter years as the time goes forward. So it means a lot of things for a lot of people that have to make some decisions, and they're not easy decisions
No,
because, like most of us, we've invested, everything in our homes. Most of us have
right?
the massive amount of our retirement or our wealth, and it's our
Totally.
place. It's also a place to live, So if
Right.
you, I think someone was saying there are literally 25% of all California housing stock is in these wildland urban interface high risk areas. I can't see that 25% of the homes in California will simply be abandoned. That does not sound like a viable future. Now, if you're renting, you may be listening and saying, oh, good, I'm off the hook because I don't own a home. Well, if Kurt's right, unfortunately, the landlords are probably going to pass on some of that high insurance costs to you. So,
Correct.
yeah.
I mean, maybe not, but I would be surprised if they didn't.
I know this is a fantasy, but I'm going to say it anyway. Some of the people who caused this extreme climate change, who live and work their whole lives in the oil industry and fight every possible remedy like solar and wind, and this is my personal take, not yours, Kirk, I think ought to be paying, not, the renter who had nothing to do mostly with what's happening. Yeah, we all drive, but the people who have fought tooth and nail against real change that's systemic, that's going to help us all transition, they are culpable. And I think at some point they will face the music, but maybe not in their lifetime. On that note, I want to thank
That'd be a tough one, I think.
I think it will be very hard. Although, many things are remedied in the courts, and that's possible someday that there may be a reckoning with who's, been responsible for actively resisting the kind of change we need to make to slow down climate change, which, is a tall order, but it can be done. We have technologies, we have the systems to do it. If there weren't this big, misinformation campaign convincing people it's not happening. So back to the insurance. Let's keep in touch. Maybe we can do another update after December once the Lara plan is actually rolled out, or maybe like 6 months after that to see if it's had any effect. I'd be curious on your take, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Of
Kirk
course.
Clifton is an insurance advisor, insurance broker who's served California for the past 20 some odd years. And we've been getting his perspective on the California insurance crisis. Kirk, thank you so much for being with us here on Talk of the Bay.
You're welcome. I shot that email to you too, so you should have it. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman, and I've been speaking with Kirk Clifton. He is an insurance broker with the Leavitt United Insurance Group, and he's been working in the state of California for the past 20 years. We'll be continuing our coverage of the Lara plan and its impact on homeowners in California, especially in high fire risk prone areas. Thanks so much for tuning in to Talk of the Bay. This is KSQD, KSQD, Santa Cruz, KSQT, Prunedale.